So my sister and I decided to go and visit some of the top gardens in the United States. We started out in Charlotte. So I've got the list here on the left of all of the places that we visited. We spent a week in the Blue Ridge Mountain area. We had a place for a week. So we did a number of walks in just the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it was early, as you see, it was March 26th when I picked my sister up in Charlotte. So here's the map, and that the dark line, if you look on the left, you'll see there's Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's where I start with the green line. The green line is showing where we went. So I picked her up in Charlotte. We went to Asheville. We spent a week there, and then we headed a little more west and then north and stayed in Roanoke. We spent 2 nights there, and then we spent another week roughly in Richmond. And then from Richmond, we went south, Williamsburg, and did the Chesapeake Bay Tunnel, which I don't know if any of you have done it, but I'll tell you it's something to go through. It's it's uh, it's 28 kilometers, and
Oh,
it's a little scary. It's a little scary. Anyway, after that, we drove up through that peninsula that you see there, which is actually Virginia at the bottom. On the right, it's Delaware, which is tiny. It's a tiny little state, Delaware. I didn't realize it was so small.
mm,
And Maryland on the left. And then we spent a week in the Brandywine Valley, just outside of Philadelphia. And that's a very temperate zone. Those of you who have gone to the Rhododendron Society meetings, you've probably seen some presentations of Mount Cuba or Chanticleer, a lot of the same rhododendrons that are being bred in Mount Cuba are also being bred in Nova Scotia. It's a similar kind of climate. So that's the first night. This is Charlotte, and the wisteria was growing wild on trees, probably going to eventually choke the trees to death. They were huge. The wisteria was like 40, 50 feet tall, and a couple of the shrubs there, the dogwoods, all of the dogwoods were in bloom. It was really quite spectacular, and the pyrus also was there. So this is one of our walks in the woods. So the star chickweed is on the left. So bellflower and bittercress. Bittercress is in the middle, and the bellflower is over on the right-hand side, just, quite small. So as I was saying about the red buds were all along both the interstate highways and then the secondary routes that we took. And some of the white dogwoods and the pink red buds. And then I've got this down on the right as Allegheny spurge, but I actually think that's barrenwort. I don't think
I
that's,
agree.
yeah, that's more the barrenwort. So one of the things that I found interesting is that we did go to a mineral. Yes, Joan? No? Did someone talk? We went to a mineral museum, and there was this big rock here, the amphibolite, and that is usually crushed up and used as gravel. So a lot of the walkways in these park areas that we were visiting had this very black gravel with flecks of mica in it. It was really quite lovely stuff. So this is Mill Mountain in Roanoke, and it's a wildflower park that is the local garden club that maintains it. It's quite a small area, but it's really lovely. And at this time of year, the trilliums were in bloom, the little leaf buttercup on the right-hand side, and more in that area. That's from the top of Mill Mountain. It's a very kind of high point, and that's showing you some of the Blue Ridge Parkway over in the distance. So we have some ragwort on the left, some brassica, and the lesser celandine on the right-hand side. And we also went, when we were in the Asheville area, we went to a community garden, and it was just lovely to see. It was huge. It was really huge. That there's a real interest in growing native species. Mount Cuba, in particular, has kind of made that their mission to rehabilitate areas. I think Mount Cuba is something like 1,000 acres, and a lot of the places are wheelchair access. I mean, it's a lot of attention has been paid to these places being accessible to everyone. So that's the Virginia blue flower, bellflower that we see pretty well everywhere. And again, this is still the wildflower garden in Roanoke on Mill Mountain, and the Honesty on the left, and the Jeffersonia, which was a new one for me. I wasn't familiar with Jeffersonia on the right-hand side. And now we're in Richmond. We took a secondary route to get there from Roanoke, heading east all the time. And so we go to Maymount, which is a large estate. Again, all of these estates are pretty large. And there's a Japanese garden and all different areas, so it meant a lot of walking, which was terrific. And so squill, wood sorrel, just I think probably growing kind of wild at the base of one of the structures, and starflower. Starflowers, you could see them actually in lawns, the way we have dandelions here in our lawns. They would just have starflowers growing all over the place. And so now we've gone to Williamsburg, and we've crossed the Chesapeake Bay Tunnel, one of the 7 engineering wonders of the world. And we stopped in Bombay Hook Wildlife Refuge. So there were a lot of birds. You'd have enjoyed that, Joan. Lots and lots of birds, lots of eagles, swans, ducks of all kinds. And you can see all this kind of these reeds. There were also meadows that had just lots and lots of milkweed. So there was a real attention to trying to have native species and stuff. So you can see the poppies there and rocket that's growing there. And then this is Delaware, the Mount Cuba Center, which is really devoted to trying out different species. So they have a large garden that's just experimental, and whichever plants after, say, 3 years survive well, then they're going to further try to breed those and spread those seeds around. So I was very interested in this storm cloud blue dogbane here. I'm familiar with the dogbane we have here, which is just pinky white. So this is really quite pretty to see, quite large clumps of that. And so now this is mid-April, April 12, 13. So things have warmed up a little bit more. You can see the dicentra, which is Dutchman's breeches, that whole family. And then just an example of some of the pond life. Again, Mount Cuba being so large, there's, lakes, there's a whole huge field, quite large. The other garden that we went to is Winterthur, and because these are so huge, we actually went there for 2 days, as we did with Mount Cuba. We went there one afternoon, and then we went back again and spent the day. And we did the same thing with Winterthur. And so here we took a trolley train ride thing, which comes with your ticket. And the trolley driver told us, I start to question the veracity of this, that this was Henry DuPont. Actually, a lot of the gardens here were from the DuPont family. And what he did is, when there was a cloud shadow that he found interesting, he would have his gardeners go out and delineate that on the grass. And so that's how these various shapes came about for the daffodil plantings. It's okay. I was very intrigued by the idea. I thought, wow, that's so neat. I'm in practice, I'm not sure how that worked, but anyhow, it does give you a lovely, variegated effect that way. So that's a barberry plant. And the other thing that I found really so gorgeous, and I wish I wish Nova Scotia was protecting more of its stone buildings, uh, like where NASCAD is. And some of these stone buildings are just gorgeous, gorgeous to look at. And so now we're in Chanticleer, which is not as big. It's only 35 acres. So that's, manageable in one day. And again, various areas devoted to different species and stuff. And they also have a working garden. Um, it's just a really beautiful garden. It's a very, very lovely garden. And in terms of my mystery plant, I have this plant here, which I think is also barrenwort. I'm not sure, but it's just a much more extravagant kind of flower than what we saw in that yellow flower that we saw earlier. So you can see some of the daffodils and the tulips are already over, even though this is just early April. So again, this is Chanticleer, and the red buds are just spectacular to see all over. And I was surprised to see, though Bob was familiar with this, the way the flowers just grow out from the bark. Uh, I'd never really seen that before. I'd never noticed that. So there's white dogwood and red buds and everywhere. Quite lovely. So then after we spent the early morning and early afternoon in Chanticleer, we drove to the Brandywine Museum. Our lodgings were wonderfully located 10, 20 minutes from all of these gardens. So it wasn't a big task to get around. So we kept driving by the Brandywine Museum, which had an exhibition of Andrew Wyeth paintings. And finally we said, well, we've got time, so let's go. So they have something like 15 acres of grounds. So everywhere you go, there's a lot of lovely vegetation. So it was a watercolor exhibition of Andrew Wyeth's, and probably most of you are familiar with the image on the top left. And there's viburnum growing on the grounds, and again that fantastic stonework, which is the kind of stonework that we still have in Nova Scotia, which I like to see preserved. That's the Brandywine Museum on top. And as you can see, it's right by a river, and people were going canoeing there. And then that's the creeping asparagus family plant down below. There were a lot of those sort of bellflowers all over the place. So that's the Brandywine Museum on the left. And on the right-hand side is Longwood. We went there the next day. That was a Monday. And we had to book our tickets online. You can't just show up. You have to have booked a ticket. Anyway, so we booked the ticket for Monday. And when we got there, the ticket taker told us that they had been sold out on Sunday. They were sold out on Sunday and Saturday. It's huge. It's 1,000 acres. I can't imagine how they can kind of sell out, but they had something like, I don't know, 7,000 visitors or whatever. So we walked through this meadow. It's quite large. This is towards the end where you see that nice little house there. And they have bluebird boxes all along the way. So this is just all native species, all natural stuff. They're not doing anything with that. They're not gardening there. As I say, it's 1,000 acres, so they've got plenty to choose from. And along the way, of course, there's this Italian garden where there's fountains, and it's very, very designed, and it's a bit of a contrast between you have that very organic natural place on the left, and then this very designed, much more structured, huge conservatory, one of the biggest I've ever seen. And they're building an extension. That's what those cranes are. They're building an extension that's the size of a football field, and it's going to have canals like in Venice. So you'll be walking in the middle of these bog plants or whatever. They expect it'll be finished in a couple of years. So there's a room just for orchids, which is always nice to see. I figure this time of year, we probably want to see a few orchids here and there. So you can see, I mean, there's the wild areas, and then there's all this topiary also, and then there's a water waterfall on the ground. So it's huge. And so the last place we went to was the Hagley Museum and Gardens. Again, there's a working garden, like a vegetable garden. We spoke to one of the young gardeners there, and the stonework again, fantastic. The building on the right-hand side, and the wisteria. A lot of the buildings had this kind of wisteria vine growing all over them. That was the man who gave us our tour. He was a retired geologist. And this house had been owned by Mrs. Cronenshield, who was a DuPont daughter. And she made a habit of coming to Nova Scotia every summer and buying hooked rugs. So the house, we spent some time looking in a lot of the rooms. There were hooked rugs, as you can see here on the bottom right, in every room. And the guide told us that they had a number of dogs, so and they didn't care. I mean, the rugs were to be used, and as you can see, this is not in pristine condition, and all the rugs were on the floor, and none of them had been like framed or put up on the wall or anything. So it was nice to see that kind of use made of, and that's probably a shetty camp rug, I would think, assuming by just the patterns that are on there. And so that was it. Then I dropped my sister off at the Philadelphia airport and drove back home. So we had a great time. And I'd love to go back. There's lots more gardens to see. Because the Brandywine Valley is so temperate, wild rhododendrons everywhere. We were there too early for most of the rhododendrons. There were just a few that were already in bloom. But I would imagine in late April, early May, it just would be spectacular to be visiting these same places. You'd have a whole other, series of plants to look at. And that's it for me.